Welcome back to the Functional Physique podcast. This is episode 3 with Joe Jefferies from the Physique Collective. Joe, again, thanks very much for coming on, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on. You're obviously widely known here in the UK and probably throughout bodybuilding. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will know who you are, but maybe not all of my guests. So if you want to just give a kind of a background on yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Sean, thank you for having me. Episode 3, I'm in there early. Who predates me? Who was
So
1 and
I had
2?
Austin Stout for the first
Yeah,
one.
good. My boy.
Um,
Yeah.
the second one is actually one of your clients, Nathan Bevan. I had him.
Oh,
on the
big
podcast.
Nave. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. You've had an incredible set of guests so far. Let's hope I can continue the trajectory. Yes, okay. So for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Joe Jeffrey. I've been coaching. This is my 11th year of coaching full time. I'm the co-founder of Physique Collective, which nowadays it's not a coaching company anymore. It was at one time. It's purely an educational platform, you could say. We had an app for many years when that was the thing, but in the last year or so, we've moved over to the school platform. It's going very well. We've got 400 videos on there, so a hell of a lot of educational content. And it's only $20 per month with Q&A every single day on there. So if anybody's interested in the educational side of things, that's that. But Instagram, if you want to check me out, is Joe_Physique Collective. You'll see all my stuff on there.
Yes, brilliant. I mean, that's a relatively cheap price for what you're going to get in that school group as well. So it's definitely something, obviously, if you're interested to jump in there.
Yeah, we've tried to. It's still, if anybody believes this or not, Physique Collective is still a non-profit company. We have ran Physique Collective for, God, are we in our 6th year? Maybe coming on 7 years? And it's been a passion project from day one. It's been purely about providing mass education to people in the enhanced space that need it at a price that literally just pays our videographer to keep producing the videos.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
No, it's funny you say that, but because there isn't many people in this space that would do that type of thing as a passion project. A lot of people are obviously maybe a bit more in it for the money rather than getting the information out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think, let's be honest, like coaching is so overpaid. We're so lucky, or I'll speak for myself, like I'm so lucky to be in this position. Like we make a great living coaching. I don't need any more money to live, but you get a good feeling. You know, I always think of myself when I was 16, 17, 18, trying to become informed on PEDs. It was so hard. It was so hard. There was, you know, those days, this was obviously pre-Instagram. I was just on like anabolicsteroidforums.com, just reading any old shit. And, you know, now we have the opposite problem of that there's so much information, you don't know what is evidence-based and what isn't, you know?
Yep. The TikTok people that just put out any garbage to get views and go kind of either TikTok or Instagram famous.
Yeah, and information is presented. I actually did a podcast last night where we were talking about this primarily with an older dude called Kev. I don't want to age him, but he's an old. He was like, I remember you from the professional muscle days. I was like, yeah, man, you know that was 16 years ago. It's so funny to think back to that. But yes, people are. It's gone from taking like days to figure out something to get in a 6-second answer. You know, the short form content on PEDs is it's an insane landscape. I don't really know what to make of it, to be honest. Like we try our best at Physique Collective to be the voice of reason amongst noise, but it's very hard to compete with controversy and really attention-grabbing headlines that's just like phenomenology when we're trying to just say reasonable things that are evidence-based. It can get lost, but luckily I've garnered quite a good following over the years, so it reaches enough people, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been following your stuff for many years now. Same way, obviously, Matt as well. He's put out obviously good information. Always find it helpful.
Thank you.
we'll kind of get into some of the stuff for today. So one of the kind of our main things from this portion of the topics is obviously everybody's got their own version of kind of the definition of health, but I'd be intrigued to see what your definition of that is, because you've got kind of that good kind of a mindset, and the way you project stuff and you explain it, it comes across as quite authentic and quite rational, whereas a lot of stuff is irrational. So I'd just like to hear what your thoughts on that is.
That my definition of health, that's
Yes.
that's that's a difficult one. I think we have places that we can be objective with health metrics, and places that we cannot quite be objective. We can be objective with things like cardiovascular health. We've got access to such fantastic markers now, specifically like cardiac MRIs and calcium scores and markers like ApoB. These are accessible to just about everybody. Same thing with like hepatic markers, inflammation markers, insulin sensitivity markers, things like this. Where we can't be so objective is with neurochemistry and to some degree to the autonomic nervous system. There are some objective markers we can use for the autonomic nervous system. One is resting heart rate. It's a pretty good marker if using it as trends. We've got HRV. That's not great. Not great. It provides some kind of objective data on the individual, but at a population-wide scale, it isn't there. But we have no way really currently to measure, like you could measure ApoB in terms of like atherogenic particles in the blood, or, HSCRP for systemic inflammation. We've got no marker that's like, here is your amount of sympathetic tone that you express per 24 hours, or parasympathetic tone you express per 24 hours. So this makes it more difficult, and probably something that we should be more proactive with. Like we were talking off air about stress and the autonomic nervous system. I think, as you'll be able to tell from my content, I think this is the single most undervalued aspect of physique development and health. And this is just something that I've come to know over coaching thousands of people over the years, is the nervous system is always the limiter. Sure, we can have physiological health issues along the way, but we can quite easily be corrective for the large majority of them. For the nervous system, it's something that very few people have modalities in place. A lot of people take a cardio protective supplement stack, or something to reduce inflammation, or something to manage their blood pressure, like an ARB, etc., etc. Or people will do aerobic work, for cardiac health. But how many people really think about autonomic tone? It's still very rare, but more and more people are doing it. In fact, you mentioned Nath Bevan. I did a presentation for his coaching group on exactly this recently, like a 90-minute presentation on the autonomic nervous system, where we went through all of the published data, specifically talking about sitting meditation. And what, it doesn't have to be meditation; it can be anything that you employ here, really. But the impact that has on markers like resting heart rate, but also what it does to the brain. And I don't know how much of your audience are PED users. Many, do you think?
There'll be some, because there'll be a crossover, obviously bodybuilding, but then some of my audience will be kind of on the autoimmune side, with IBD and stuff like that, because I've got IBD myself. So
great point. So I don't know if you saw the podcast I did with Tom Schuster. We were talking about, so this was something that just kept coming through, and Austin, I think agrees with me now on this. I think I've managed to convince him. In that a lot of these cases present with, and I'm going to do this, and I don't want to minimize and say that these things aren't real, but it'll make sense when I say the point. Functional health issues like POTS or SIBO or IBD, like you mentioned, all very real definitions based on clusters of symptomologies.
Yep.
I find in the very large majority of cases, when we approach these with we'll call it mindfulness-based recovery approach, as compared to a let's put all our effort into fixing this very specific thing, more often than not, for the very, very large majority of cases, things resolve themselves when there's enough, we could call it space in the autonomic nervous system to do that. Because the brain and the nervous system, that you can't talk about one without the other. They are interconnected. Specifically, the autonomic nervous system, downstream from that, is all physiological function. And for you to recover physiologically, cellularly, mitochondrially, etc., wherever the bottleneck in your health is that's causing this issue, you simply need to have sufficient parasympathetic tone expressed to do that. And paradoxically, that's not always through forcibly calming yourself. Quite often it's through practicing redirection of attention or acceptance-based strategies. That's just very powerful literature. This literature has now, in recent years, crossed over into the chronic pain realm. I think the guy's name is Dr. Alan Bacon, maybe. Dr. Alan Bacon, I think. Well, he's a chronic pain specialist who's having amazing results with these acceptance-based strategies, which shows how tightly the brain is connected with your physiological experience and not just your psychological experience. So yes, I think having a thorough understanding of the autonomic nervous system and to some degree the brain is something that will improve your health, but also your experience of this life, your quality of life, your purposeness. What's the word? I think the word is just purpose. To be honest,
Yeah.
the meaning of your, how meaningful your life is it all happens in between your skull, you know. But yeah, this was just, I started to get much better success with using these acceptance-based strategies for these more functional health issues as compared to trying to specifically fix the diagnosis the individual had been given, or in most cases, to be honest, had given themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because it's something that I've been starting to look into a lot more. Also, I've suffered with IBD for years, and at the start of me suffering with that, there wasn't as much information as there is now, although some of the information now is quite bad, just the same as everything else on social media. But again, I've now started to link a lot of it that I couldn't perceive the stress. But then when I started to realise that I was actually stressed and then started to bring that down and start to think more logically and clearly, then that's helped me tenfold. So I think the problem is that a lot of people think it's a bit woo-woo and don't really want to, they don't want to entertain it. And it's not until you try and convince them to start looking at these things and then they see a difference, then obviously that's got a compounding effect then on them.
Yeah, well, we can separate it from the woo-woo and spirituality here. If you're into your spirituality and stuff, me too. That's cool. But let's keep it evidence-based. What we're actually talking about here at a functional physiological level is neuroplasticity. And the easiest example I always give is with fear, because it's so easy for everyone to understand, because everyone can understand fear. Not everyone can understand what it's like to have SIBO or IBD or POTS or whatever. Everyone listening has been scared at some point in their life. So I use fear or anxiety for this. So there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's a very old, very dumb part of the brain. Evolutionarily, we're way past it, but we still have it. This is where stress and fear and anxiety sounds off. So when the amygdala lights up, you have excitatory neurotransmission like glutamate, in some cases dopamine, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. So the fear response when the amygdala lights up. But the amygdala lights up through no conscious decision of your own. You have no control over the amygdala. None. No rational, no prefrontal cortex, no limbic connectivity to the amygdala. For example, if you're walking down the street and someone goes, out of like an alleyway or something, you have no conscious choice. Your body fills with adrenaline and cortisol.
Yep.
So the first thing to understand is that this response is subconscious. Now, the brain is far from perfect. It works on prediction. So you can have amygdala response to anything, any old nonsense. Your brain can learn to associate a heightened stress response, completely subconscious. So people have fears of just about everything. You know, OCD, which is the highest level of anxiety disorder, is just a great example of this. You know, a life built around compulsions, because the amygdala is going off very often, it's misfiring, so to speak. That is the characterization of OCD. So when we have this sort of subconscious amygdala alarm, that downstream impacts things like gastric motility, of course, because whenever it goes off, sympathetic tone is activated. Now, the good thing about the brain is it's very plastic, which means it has the ability to reorganize itself, rewire itself based on experience. Remember, I said the brain's like a prediction engine, and it works just like the Instagram algorithm. So the things that you interact with a lot, it keeps presenting, and it learns based on experience. So if you, for example, interact with the thought of IBD lows, if you keep thinking about it, how do I fix this? I hate that I've got this. Oh, if I eat this, is it going to set me off? Should I be doing this? Going on Reddit, reading through all the IBD subreddits, buying every new book course on IBD. Yeah. So these are behaviors that people do. And the brain watches you doing that and goes, IBD is a threat. It's a problem. So we need to keep bringing it to his attention. We need to keep bringing it up because he's interacting with it all the time. He loves thinking about IBD because he's thinking about it all the time. Let me give him loads more of that because he loves doing that, you know? And then because you don't like it, because it's a threat and the brain keeps giving it to you, sympathetic tone is consistently elevated. And you end up in this cycle. So you have through I'm not talking about you, by the way, Sean, I'm just using this as an example. So hypothetical person has now, through no fault of their own, accidentally rewired their brain to keep presenting them something that they actually don't like.
Yep.
But because they interact with it so much, the brain's algorithm prediction engine just keeps giving it to them. Now neuroplasticity never stops. It slows down as you age, but it's always there. Annoyingly, you can't just like delete a neural pathway. I wonder in the future when you can like download your consciousness to AI, kind of go, I don't like that one. Let me get rid of that. But what we can is wire over new, stronger neural pathways. And this is where these acceptance-based strategies come in. And this is what's been shown in the literature in the fMRI studies on long-term meditators and things like that. So again, no spirituality here. This is good, high-quality evidence. Is when your brain presents the thought, you instead redirect your attention elsewhere and you don't interact with it. And the brain goes, okay, gave him that. It was obviously the wrong thing because he treated it with zero importance. He just completely left it alone like it was nothing. That's acceptance, basically. Just, okay, that's there, but whatever, I'm going to do this thing instead. The brain slowly wires down from the response and instead towards what you guide your attention to. This is why in the psychotherapeutic literature, there's a big thing about valued actions. If you can establish the things that are valuable to you and you can do them whilst things that you don't like are happening to you, whether it be fear or any of the symptoms of this functional health issue that you've got, if you can just accept them for what they are, not try to fix them, stop buying additional supplements, stop asking ChatGPT, stop going on Reddit, and instead do things with your day that are valuable to you, and just keep redirecting your attention, the brain wires away from the alert of the system, and then eventually the nervous system can desensitize. The amygdala will stop sounding the alarm because the thoughts and the experiences stop becoming ever present. That's how acceptance works, because you have to purely accept the thought or the experience, the symptom, the feeling, the pain, the discomfort. You can't interact with it, or the brain sees you interacting with it and gives you more. If you can be like, okay, that's there, I'll leave it alone, I'll do this instead. That's exactly how we start to get away from these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you look at it and all the data that's coming out now on this type of thing compared to years ago when it wasn't really getting spoken about, you know. But again, to your point, it's very undervalued and not many people are talking about it. And it's like yourself that I heard quite a lot speaking about it, and then that's what made me start to look into it. Plus, obviously, in speaking to Austin, he'd mentioned that you had said these type of things as well, which made me obviously go into that type of thing as well. So
Yeah, sorry, just quickly. I think I'm quite
that's
lucky
right.
that I, I I have a keen interest in mindfulness and Buddhism and Taoism and things and the history thereof, and I've spent a long time, many years, interested in the philosophy, and then when I saw it, the published literature, it amazed me. But then when I saw the crossover to our industry, I was like, oh my goodness, this fits
Yeah.
this fits perfectly, you know.
Yep.
And then I put the model into action because it works in and what's very interesting is when you go into the like anxiety disorder realm, and I talk about anxiety a lot on my channel, you've probably seen, because it's the thing that I get the most DMs about. It's people may not think this, but it is so rife in the bodybuilding world. I think because it's such a stressful activity, so the nervous system does become sensitized from high drug use, high training volumes, high drug loads over many years, etc. But when you look at the anxiety disorder realm and you look at the symptoms that these people deal with, this shocked and amazed me when I started reading these books on anxiety disorder, like from people like Dr. Claire Weeks or Drew Lynn Salata or Josh Fletcher, these people that are like pioneers of anxiety disorder recovery. The symptoms that these people with these anxiety disorders have are exactly the same symptoms that people in the functional health space have. I was like, So I started doing some trawling on Reddit. I'd go to various subreddits, like the POTS subreddit. You know, Reddit's like where
Yeah.
people come to ruminate. You know,
Yeah. Yep.
and I'd look at the POTS subreddit or the chronic fatigue subreddit or the SIBO subreddit. And I'm like, all of these people have exactly the same symptoms
Same.
as one another, but they've just categorized themselves into different subcategories of illness. And what they are the symptoms of a nervous system that's just in bad shape. And
Yep.
the body does some insane things when the nervous system is sensitized. I'm not going to use the term dysregulated because that's a term that wellness gurus use to sell shitty ebooks. That
Yeah.
you can't dysregulate your nervous system. In fact, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do from the information that you're giving it. You know, it's working perfectly actually. So yeah, this was amazing to me. I was like, oh my goodness, actually, this is all downstream from the brain and the autonomic nervous system. And we should approach these things with the same mindfulness based, acceptance based strategies that the science is proven to be highly efficacious in the anxiety disorder arena. And since I've been applying that, it's working so fantastically. And other coaches like Austin, you know, he's so deeply entrenched in that functional health space. I remember thinking, shit, he's not going to like what I've got to say here. But now he's seeing the same thing, you know, and it's been an incredible journey over the last couple of years to see this happen, and I'm hoping it continues to build and thrive.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems as if there's a couple more people talking about it now, but I think obviously you're probably one of the pioneers that started the momentum on that. But I don't think there's anybody really getting into it as deep as what you do and how you portray it across. Um, so on this kind of a topic, you know, if somebody basically just landed at your door and they were looking for help, now their goals physique related, but they're having maybe these autoimmune IBD type symptoms. What, you know, they've got a fear of food. What's the kind of a low hanging fruits that you like to implement straight away, or is it a longer process? What way do you look at it with the individual that's in front of you?
It's definitely going to be a long process if the individual has spent years getting to this point or maintaining this point, especially if it is brain and nervous system related. The one bad thing about neuroplasticity is that it is so slow. So slow. It's like 30 days to wire a new, really faint neural pathway. Um, but what I will say is, again, spirituality aside, this is entirely evidence based. The single most efficacious thing you can do in your day to, over time, build a healthier, more functional brain and nervous system is meditation. And I want people to think of meditation not as something to calm down. We get calm and peaceful, sitting like really trying to be chilled out. Is No, traditionally, in Buddhist tradition, this isn't what meditation is for. Meditation is training for the mind. This is where we train the brain. It's not where we get comfortable. In fact, most traditional meditations that have really high efficacy in the clinical data are very uncomfortable. They often include sitting and facing the things that make you very uncomfortable. When you sit with pure acceptance of your experience, most people don't like their internal experience. That's why we distract ourselves all day with nonsense. And most people are quite confronted when you have to sit with yourself in silence. But the studies on brain, like structural brain changes and formation changes in long-term meditators is amazing. You see the amygdala shrink up. You see the prefrontal cortex activation come alive. So we're talking being calmer, but also more resilient to stress, better executive function, better verbal fluency, higher motivation, greater performance. And also, for hypertrophy to occur, there has to be sufficient parasympathetic tone. That is the adaptation. You need to be able to generate what we call an autonomic state shift post-workout. The only time you should really be sympathetic is when you're training, but most people are sympathetic a good portion of the day. So having 20 minutes per day, 12, there was a recent study that came out that had 12 minutes of meditation that showed pretty robust brain structure changes over 8 weeks. But make it a priority. Treat meditation like you treat cardio. It's very similar to me. You're not going to want to do it. It's going to be uncomfortable when you do it, just like cardio. But there's a really good adaptation, and you do it for long enough, and you really start to see the benefits. Meditation is not something you sit and do and then go on about the rest of your day. It's where it's like, imagine this is where I drive neuroplasticity. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're doing a basic breath awareness meditation, the most simple of meditation, and you're focusing on the sensation of breath in your nostrils or whatever as you sit there. This is called anapana traditionally. Again, you don't need to worry about Buddhism or spirituality or anything. Now you sit focusing on this, and what happens? Thought comes up. Did I answer that DM? How long is this going to be going on? Shall I just check the timer? My knees hurt, sat in this position. Is this going to work? Is it working yet? All this bullshit the brain gives you. And you go, no, let me redirect focus. And then you come back to focusing on the breath. That's like 1 rep, because the brain gives you stuff and you go, no, I want to focus on this. And then maybe you get a few seconds again in the early days, maybe you get a couple breaths and then you think about something else. Let me just move my hips. I'm a bit uncomfortable or whatever. Hold on. We're not focused on the breath. Let me go back. You go back. The brain watches you do that. The brain's like, we keep giving him all this stuff, but he's just going, no, we're doing this now. Most importantly, this in the present moment, focusing on something that's happening here and now. And what happens over time is the brain rewires away from giving you stuff, and instead you can exist in what's happening right now. So when you're training, you can train and you can focus on just training. When you're with your family, you can sit and you can be with your family. You're not ruminating and stressing on things. When you go to sleep, you shut your eyes and you can go to sleep, not turning thoughts over in your head. The result is you can live here and now. Most of the time, people are perfectly safe. I'm perfectly safe in here, but if I was really stressing about something, I would have the same neurochemistry of somebody that was in danger. But if I can live in this present moment where I'm completely safe in this room, no problem, I can have nice high parasympathetic tone and focus on exactly what I'm doing. That's what we train in meditation. So the amygdala, of course, comes down because that threat response isn't going off, because the threat is produced from in here. Your own bullshit. How often are we under physical threat? Never,
Yeah.
Never. How often are you just like getting into fights or getting chased by some kind of predator? Rarely, rarely. Um, so living, when you hear about people talking about present moment awareness, this is all that this means. The ability not to be burdened by the nonsense your brain gives you and just to live here. And that is the skill that you train with meditation. So then when you get the thoughts of POT symptoms, IBD symptoms, you need to go and research this, you go, no, brain, I'm doing this at the minute. I'm walking right now. I'm looking at the nature. I'm listening to the podcast. I'm with my dog. I'm sitting with the family. No, no brain. I'm not doing this now. And the more you do that, you can imagine how good your life would be if you wasn't burdened by excessive rumination and worries. That's what we train.
Yeah. And if somebody wanted to kind of learn the meditation or that, is there like an app, or is there something that you would point somebody towards to learn how to do that? Because obviously not everybody is going to have the knowledge to do that, so they need to learn it from somewhere. So where do you normally advise people?
Yeah, so meditation has been westernized, it's been commoditized, and it's a shame, really. The amount of apps with guided meditations and things like this. You don't need any of that. In fact, I would encourage against it. Because what happens when we sit and we put a guided meditation on? We're just listening to somebody else. We're not training our brain to be still and training ourselves in focus. We're just listening to some shit. So no, I don't recommend. So I use an app called Insight Timer, but I only use the timer on it. I like it's got the traditional bells. So if you want a good timer, Insight Timer is good. I just hit 14,000 minutes this morning of meditation, so I've done a bit. that's taken me many, many years. So I think the best place to start with meditation is, again, don't get caught up, because you'll see on TikTok this Vipassana meditation, this Shikantaza meditation, this Zazen meditation. Oh, which one do I do? Which is the best? Don't worry. Single object focus is the best place to start. And you can pick. That can be breath awareness is the most common sensation. You can use the air coming in and out of your nostrils. You can use the sensation of your belly rising or falling, or you can use the sensation in the crown of your head. Can you feel anything there? Just focus on that for 10 minutes. Is there anything, or your hands? You feel buzzing in your hands or whatever? Just focus on your hands for 10 minutes. Anything that's happening in the present moment you can use. Just pick one, quite simply. Yep. It doesn't matter what it is. There's no specific objective thing. Very common is like middle of the forehead focus. Breath's very common. Hands are quite common. Body scans are quite common, but I wouldn't do that until you've developed good single point focus. Just pick one thing, set a timer for 10 minutes. Every time your brain wanders, bring it back to the thing you're focusing on. It's that simple. And as your focus improves, start to add a bit of time. Easy, simple.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that. And on this sort of a topic as well, how much people's progress do you think is lost because of stress and things like this? Like how much progress would people get more if they were more aware of this?
So of course I can't put an objective marker on this, but I can tell you, as somebody that's coached thousands of people over the year, it's no secret why the most relaxed, chilled out individuals have the highest level of progression. It's like the Ronnie Coleman effect. He's such a chilled dude. And we have to remember, all hypertrophy, so all skeletal muscle hypertrophy, muscle growth adaptation, this happens in the windows in between your bouts of resistance training. And this is entirely dependent on parasympathetic expression. If you can't get and stay parasympathetic post-workout, you quite simply will not drive muscle protein synthesis to the greatest degree that you could. So is there a way for us to say specifically how much progress would be gained or lost? No, but we know based on the demand and adaptation principle. Think of that, demand, adaptation. To every demand, there's an adaptation. Resistance training is a demand, then it requires an adaptation. But what happens if in that adaptation window, there's other demands? You're clouding the adaptive capability. If there's stress, if there's lack of sleep, etc., you are now introducing new needs for adaptations to those, more recovery variable. And you're taking away from your ability to drive adaptations at that point.
Yeah. And do you think that, if somebody said to you that they do everything right on paper, but stuff's still not working, do you think then that that's a possibility, or do you think that you could probably poke holes and find that they're probably not doing everything right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to assess the specific situation, but normally, well, you've mentioned that there is this phenotype of individual that does everything right, and that's normally an indication that there's an obsessive tendency in there. And believe me, I know everything about that, and that normally lends itself to stress and worry, as in, I need to make sure I'm doing everything right all the time, and I need to spend a good time researching other ways to make sure they're not better than the way that I'm doing, rather than just getting the training done and then chilling out. You know, this is the kind of phenotype of bodybuilder that will struggle when it comes to adaptations, because they're stressed about what they could be doing better or what they're not doing, and that's not a good place for the nervous system to be.
Yeah. And again, on this similar sort of topic, how often do you feel that you would maybe need to pull somebody back? So it's learning to know when to push somebody or protect them, by pulling them back.
So I think we're in quite a unique circumstance in the bodybuilding world, where we have a really good objective marker of adaptation, and that's progressive overload. Your progressive overload in the gym is a consequence of the hypertrophy adaptation. It's not the thing that drives hypertrophy, but it tells you that hypertrophy has occurred in between bouts of training. And this is very lucky, because, like, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. There's not a single objective marker. Like, what am I going to do? I got tapped less today or something.
Yeah.
We're really lucky in the bodybuilding space to have this. If you are progressively overloading week after week, and you're not seeing linear increases in resting heart rate or blood pressure or sleep disturbances, then your autonomic nervous system is working quite well. If you're struggling to progressively overload or regressing, or, which is quite often, bodybuilders can find enough adrenaline in their training to forcibly drive progression, but then outside of training, appetite has attenuated, they're waking up at 3 a.m., cortisol surge, kind of HPA axes, dysregulation, then, right, we need to address this excessive sympathetic tone drive that's occurring by pulling things way back and focusing on activities like meditation, or like extended exhale breath work, or like time in nature, things like that. These are all evidence-based modalities to drive parasympathetic tone as well. Spend time on those instead, to then reap great rewards. And it's quite often that individuals, when they do all of these things well and they have a really functional, flexible nervous system, we could say dose of training stimulus that they need is normally far less than in the past. Great example of this that I always bring up is Christian Koos. He added like 66 pounds. Yeah, man. So, like, I'll tell people his training programming. I literally just wrote him a new program. I've got it. I'm literally looking at it on my right hand side here. So 2 sets of pecs, 2 sets of lats, 2 sets of traps, 2 sets of biceps, 2 sets of triceps, twice a week. So 4 sets a week on the upper body, 1 set a week on the 2 sets a week on the lower body. That's it. And he's absolutely blown up, and this progressive overload just went completely through the roof. Because and look, I'm not saying everybody will get away with volumes like that, because they may not, but it's just far less than he was doing in the past. Why has he grown so much more? The point here is that we now have equal to matched demand and adaptation. We don't have this excessive demand, insufficient adaptation, need to deload constantly, sleep dysregulation, etc., etc. He's well recovered and able to perform very well every time he comes into the gym, because of some of the things that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I've followed his progress for a while now, and he's definitely improved tenfold. I mean, he's eating a good chunk of calories and carbs as well, because I'm sure he brought his protein down as well, didn't he? Because he was on a kind of a higher protein, and then he's brought that down, and that helped him as
Yeah,
well, was it?
yeah. See, I normally set protein somewhere between 0.8 and 1 gram per pound of body weight for most of my clients. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's funny because people say, "Well, that's super low." I'm like, "Well, I'm just going off the published data. You know, it's actually quite high in the published data. You know."
yeah. I think a lot of people still stuck in the old school way of bodybuilding, where it's, you know, 300, 350, 400 grams of protein
Oh,
instead of it
couldn't
being
imagine
the less. You know, there's still quite a lot of people that's like that though, and then they wonder
it. Yeah,
why they can't get their food, or they're sitting with food in their stomach like a brick, you know,
yeah,
because it's not digesting properly.
yeah. My preference is to leverage carbohydrate always. You know, this is a glucose intensive activity that we do here. You know, I want as much of that caloric load to be carbohydrate as possible, really. And like Christian's results really speak for themselves. And the GI function, like you said, I think anything over what protein is necessary is just a burden. And the thing is, for enhanced guys as well, I think it's no secret that Christian uses PEDs. If anyone thought he was natty, that they're in for an awakening. But they drive protein accretion in and of themselves. You know, they drive muscle protein synthesis in and of themselves for your need. So your need for dietary protein, at least my hypothesis is that it's much, much lower. I wouldn't be surprised if he could come down to 140 grams of protein and still make the progress that he does, you know?
Yep. And just while we're talking about that protein, is that overall protein, or is that protein just from kind of a protein sources? If
No,
that makes sense.
I only track total. So that's total protein. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. From all sources. I never, I hate the idea of tracking direct macros. It drives me insane. I like to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
see
Overall.
everything. Yeah.
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 It
So,
makes more sense to me as well.
yeah. So most guys, you know, they're going to end up 180, 200 grams ish. You know, most of these guys that I'm coaching are 100 kilos ish. And we don't have any problems. You know, most people much prefer it. You know, much prefer it. It's funny when you get to like the higher calorie environment, you're eating like a meal that's got like 75 grams of chicken in it. You're like, this is
Yeah.
such a small amount of of direct protein, you know. But hey, it's you know it's what keeps the GI feeling good and the training performance really high level.
Yep. I mean, just as you're mentioning about the GI, you know, a question that I've got for you on that is, do you think that you can still have a good physique even though your GI maybe isn't working correctly and is a bit fucked up? Or do you think that both of them correlate, that really in order to have the best physique that you've got, you really need to have everything working properly in the GI?
Do you know what? I know, as you probably can imagine, loads of bodybuilders, super heavyweight guys, that have terrible GI function. It's pretty normal. You know, I have lots of consultations with super heavyweight guys that are eating 6,000, 7,000 calories a day. And I'll ask them about stool frequency. I'll be like, 8 or 9 a day, all loose, you know, severe bloating after meal 3 until the end of the day. You know, it there's this GI dysregulation. Is it optimized for things like nutrient partitioning and inflammation? Probably not. But you know, I think it is slightly overblown how much local, we'll say, stomach or intestine inflammation is going to impede things like nutrient partitioning. Biology is just not that basic, you know. Otherwise, we would see it's like the malabsorption argument. I don't really buy this much either. You know, we just don't see that in human physiology. People aren't becoming like malnourished from GI issues. You know, it just doesn't happen when you're eating large boluses of calories. So no, I don't think so. I think like should you just like be fine with having some GI dysregulation? No, I think it is worth addressing, whatever it may be. But I also don't think it's worth. I think again, when I flick back in time And I think back to when I first sort of moved into this world. I remember I got this diet right from the Animal Pack forum when I was like 17, and it was 6 liters of whole milk, 12 eggs, and a loaf of bread every day. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did I have GI distress? Fuck yes.
Yeah.
But so did everyone. I think everybody was like, oh yeah, this is just like just what happens with bodybuilders. We eat loads of food, we eat loads of protein, like so your stomach's going to be a bit messed up. But now it feels like every problem is a serious problem on social media. Everything we need to like really drive in on. And again, please don't get me wrong, anybody listening to this. I'm not saying you should just ignore your GI distress and things like that. But I do also think a little bit of GI distress here and there when you're eating far more calories than the human physiology was ever evolved to consume and much larger boluses of protein. There is some acceptance that comes into this of it's going to be that way, if this is what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked that question is because I get quite a lot of people, more Gen Pop side, that just think, especially with IBD, that they can't lose weight because they're IBD, or they can't gain weight because they're IBD, or because they're on certain medications, because maybe they've been put on prednisolone, etc. That they can't lose weight because the moon phase, etc. And it's just like, I have lived through this. I've got IBD, I've got a stoma, and you can still do everything as a normal person. Now, is my GI, function working perfectly? No. Is it going to ever work 100%? Probably not, because of condition. However, I can maximise it to the best of my ability and still get a decent physique. And I think it's just trying to flip that mindset on a lot of people. And I think, to your point, everything that you've mentioned about mindset, I think that's what people need to start looking at, because that's ultimately what's holding them back, is their own mindset.
Oh, for sure. Because like when you have a diagnosed condition, like yourself, you have something that you're suffering with, there's multiple layers of suffering, isn't there? And this is what, again, I'll use a Buddhist saying where they talk about the second arrow being the one you fire at yourself. Let's say you have a condition and you suffer because of that. That's the first arrow, and you can't do anything about that. But the cognitive turning over of, why do I have this? What can I do about this? Is, I need to research all of these different supplements and these different protocols for this. Why me focusing on the issue all the time? That's the second arrow. You give yourself another layer of suffering, rather than, this is where I am, let me accept it for what it is and just go forward with what I can do. And that's it. That will put the nervous system in a much, I think, don't threat identify your own symptomologies, basically. You've got enough suffering without your brain giving you a threat response on top of it,
Yeah, it's funny you actually mentioned that, because it's something that me and Nath picked up on as well, about people giving themselves blanket terms and what they perceive or call themselves, right? Okay, IBD is a specific thing, but other people give themselves, blanket symptoms, and they run with that, instead of just overall looking at, taking that away and then seeing what else, and they're overlooking basic things like their sleep and how they go about their actual day, their daily habits, that could fix a lot of the issues, and instead they're obviously just overstepping them.
Yeah, a lot of these issues, again, to be clear, things that aren't diagnosable issues like IBD, that have very physiological consequences, things that we're talking about, like, and again, I'm please, nobody listening to this think that I'm belittling anybody with this, but POTS, or I think IBS to some degree is a good example of this.
We spoke about that as well with IBS, with the umbrella term, basically.
Yeah, anyone with GI distress, you've got IBS, is like, what else was I going to say? Chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme, mold, toxic mold poisoning, the list goes on. Is a game of attention. All of these things are a game of attention. You give them attention and they grow.
Yep.
That's the thing. That is the key lesson here. People that have never heard of these things, funnily enough, don't have them. And they genuinely don't. because it is attention based, and the nervous system can do unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable. Like if anybody wants to see what the brain can do, search like DPDR, depersonalization, derealization. This is just what the brain does when it's been through a very stressful time. It can produce a warped view of your own reality, and that sustains if you keep paying attention to it. And it goes when you stop feeding it. It's unbelievable. The brain can signal pain. It has such tight regulation over GI function, cardiac function. So all what you think are physical symptomologies absolutely can be attributed to brain and nervous system overactivity, overexcitation, sympathetic tone. I think with a lot of things like this is like go to a good doctor or just get your blood work done, have a look through there. Don't worry about all of these weird like additional terms that people are inventing for clusters of symptoms. And if your health is in good shape, you need to just practice acceptance of these things and carry on with your life and guide your attention elsewhere. Because what happens is people Reddit's the worst or ChatGPT's the worst, asking it about symptoms, and you're just pouring gas on the fire at that point.
Yeah, I mean, social media doesn't help as well, especially with all these kind of a click through carousels. If you're suffering with this, if you see this symptom, it means you have this, and then before you know it, everybody's diving deep into these things, classifying themselves as, as you said with SIBO, etc. But they've never tested anything, so they don't actually know what's happening.
Yeah, or it's like, do you have brain fog? Maybe you've got mold poisoning, and you think, oh my fucking God. Because people in this, here's this list of symptoms of somebody that's highly stressed. It's always that, but do you have this? Do you have that? And it preys on, well, it's just for engagement, isn't it? Because most people have brain fog time to time. I certainly do, but I don't think I've got one of these functional health issues. This is just what the body. I think we need to get better in modern day of just letting the body do, letting the brain and the nervous system do what it needs to do in times of stress without fucking with it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think, see if you've got a real functional health issue, you will know about it because it will be intense, and there'll be a lot more problems than what a slideshow on Instagram is going to talk to you about. There's going to be far more deciding factors, because especially when you come into autoimmune problems, normally when you've got one thing, other things start to cascade. Like I'll use myself for an example. I've got IBD, but I actually started then getting blood clots, and I had started getting other things, but it was all cascaded through the gut. It started affecting other things in my body, and then it was just a compounding effect then for me, which I've got mostly under control now. But at the time, it was obviously nobody was really speaking about it. It took 5 years to get me diagnosed with IBD. At the start, I was told I had just IBS, and it didn't make sense to me because the way things were going. So I think people just need to learn, as you say, to accept things, but to really look back and think, is this a major problem, or is this something that I'm creating in my head, and that's what's creating the problem? Because it's as you said, it's in the head and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Well, health anxiety is rife these days, and health anxiety can produce very real symptoms. Like PVCs and heart palpitations. These can occur completely independent of there being anything wrong with your heart at all. The same way that pretty severe GI disturbance can be driven purely by stress and sympathetic tone, and nothing is actually quote unquote wrong with the GI. And in this sport, we put a lot of stress on the nervous system. I often refer to the autonomic nervous system as a bank, where you're making withdrawals and you've got to pay money back in. That's how it works. And a lot of people are running at debt. I'm waking up and taking my Clen and my Yihimbine and caffeine, I'm taking loads of money out the bank. I'm trading in case some more money out the bank. Another hit of caffeine, midday, let's take some more money out of the bank. And then maybe getting some really shitty sleep at night, so I'm only paying half of it back. We need to think fundamentally more about, okay, how do I bring some balance towards the things that I'm asking? Because the thing is, the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, it doesn't really slip quickly. It's something that happens cumulatively.
Yep.
And this is where these symptoms start to present, because stressed bodies do some incredible things, you know, can have some incredible symptoms that feel like, I was going to say feel real, they are real, but they're just downstream from your own nervous system trying to regulate itself, you know. So if we can start implementing more things into fitness slash bodybuilding behaviors like meditation, like breath work, like staying away from social media, such a killer, you know, getting out in nature, spending time in the present moment, we'd be so much better off. You'd enjoy your training more, you'd feel better, sleep better, better fat loss, better muscle growth. I think it needs to be approached with as much seriousness as we do training. And since I've been doing that with my clients, everyone's not only progressing more, but they're enjoying the process so much more as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of it, isn't it? It's what you enjoy, because the more you enjoy something, the more effort you'll put in, the more you'll get back out. Because as you said, you know, if you go with the bank example, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that's the way that people, when you put it into that frame of reference, because a lot of people would just never thought about the nervous system in that manner, you know.
Yeah.
When you put it into that frame of reference, like, oh yeah, I'm actually asking a lot, because every time you train, you know, you're kicking out adrenaline, you're kicking out cortisol. There has to be some. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah.
You know, there has to be some sort of balance, and like contest preps, for example, they're very, very stressful times. You know, we have to have sufficient time. PEDs, these in and of themselves, androgens in and of themselves drive sympathetic tone. You know,
Yep.
we need everything that happens in bodybuilding is sympathetic, basically. You know,
Yeah.
we need to have some consideration for the parasympathetic on the other side.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. Well, listen, Joe, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do hope that you'll maybe come back on the podcast at a later date.
Of course, man. Anytime.
We can maybe choose a different topic of that. But thanks very much for what you've said there. Makes total sense. Do you want to make any more? I know you've done your stuff at the start with mentioning obviously the school group are in, you know, and Instagram.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere else that you want to say to people that they can reach out and do anything?
No, but maybe just mentioning that everything we've spoken about today, I've got full protocols and descriptions and things on the school, including I re-recorded the seminar that I did for NAIF to give to the school group as well. So if anybody wants to learn about the autonomic nervous system, about neuroplasticity, about meditation protocols, breathwork protocols, things like that, the school group has all of that as well. It doesn't just have PDs and nutrition and training and posing and prep and whatever. It's got all of this mindfulness stuff in there as well, if you guys want to check that out.
Yeah. And I'm sure I've seen it on your Instagram stories as well, but there's a question and answer part on that forum as well that they can directly ask
every single day. Yeah? Every single day, all questions answered on the app. Before we moved over to school, I'd answered 7,000 questions.
Some of mine.
So yeah, I'm on there if anybody's got a question for me, I answer them every single morning on there without fail.
Well, brilliant, Joe. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. Just try to find my mouse here.